Well, not all the news is bad in Rhody land. Jeff Dowtin just signed a two-way contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. Today I have Sam DiGiovanni with me. He's a beat reporter with the Philadelphia 76ers. First of all, welcome to the show, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. Really, I'm happy to be here and talk about Jeff with you.
So how did this happen?
So the Sixers have been kind of toying with their two-way contracts. Kind of been a staple at least last few years with Daryl Morey, just constantly cycling in guys, trying to see what guys can stick. And Jeff is the latest one. Signed a two-way contract after playing with the Delaware Blue Coats in the G-League for much of the first part of this season. He was actually traded for Mac Maclung ahead of the season. There, I don't know exactly how player rights work in the G League, but those two's their rights were swapped.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it was it's notable. Obviously, Mac won the dunk contest last year, played a few games with the Sixers, and Jeff kind of came up obviously under the radar. The Sixers have been so bombarded with injuries that they needed some depth at the guard spot. And Jeff, obviously has plenty of familiarity with Nick Nurse, so he was brought on to a two-way contract and was instantly given some minutes ahead of Terquavion Smith and Ricky Council the fourth, who had been on the two ways for most of the season. They were undrafted rookies, and so far Jeff's looked pretty interesting. It'll be, we'll kind of have to see what the rest of the season looks like for him as the Sixers guards finally start to get a little healthier. But yeah, he's with them so far, and even in the limited minutes he's played, you can see that he's very steady, that he just knows how to play the game, as Nick has said plenty of times.
He doesn't turn the ball over, does he?
No, that was one of the things when ahead of his first appearance with the Sixers, I was talking with another reporter, and he mentioned that as one of the things that Nick likes in players, and that's something that Jeff obviously brings to the table on top of just knowing what to do on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. And as we all know, he was well liked, not liked, loved by Toronto Raptors, not just the coach Nick Nurse, but the president of the Toronto Raptors, the fans loved him, the media, and they were very sad to see him go at the last minute. And when playoffs came, they released him.
Jeff again kind of came up through the ranks of the team, and there was a certain point where Sixers kind of need to make a change, just address those injuries like I've been mentioning. They let go, or I guess they let go of Kenneth Lofton, and he's now with the Jazz, but they gave that spot to Jeff, looking for just someone to provide some steady minutes for them. And Jeff is still with them. I would say he's, probably third stringer is the best way to describe it right now. They've finally got some guys back, so playing time for the rest of the season is uncertain, but he's obviously got Nick Nurse's trust.
So tell me about the rotation now, first and second ahead of Jeff Dowtin. Who are they?
So the Nick has been experimenting with starting lineups a lot. He's trying to find the right combination of guys. Joel Embiid has been out for a while, and they're trying to just keep their head above water in a very competitive Eastern Conference playoff picture. So obviously the starting backcourt now is Tyrese Maxey and Kyle Lowry, but Kyle, I think they're working out a kind of ramp up phase with him. They've got him in the buyout market, but he had spent the past month not playing after he was traded from the Heat to the Hornets. It was clear he wasn't going to stick around in Charlotte. They're rebuilding. They're a young team. They didn't need him. But so the Sixers are trying to gradually work him up. And so he's missed, I think, at least 2 games now, just because it was a back-to-back. They didn't want to overwork him. Tyrese, obviously, the co-star to Embiid, was dealing with a concussion recently, and that kind of opened up the spot that Jeff had for the games that he played that wasn't just garbage time. And then the guards off the bench have got Buddy Hield. They usually would have D'Anthony Melton, but he's been dealing with an injury too. They'll play, Kelly Oubre at guard. And Nick kind of runs smaller-ish rotations, doesn't go to a full 10-man rotation for most games. But there have been recent times where Jeff has made appearances. So as the team starts to get healthy at the guard spot, it's probably going to eat into his playing time. But like I mentioned, I think that whenever they need like a change of pace, whenever someone needs to step in if somebody else goes down, I think Nick will turn right to Jeff. He was bought in much later to the Sixers than Smith and Council. And Council's kind of a wing, so
Mm-hmm.
his position isn't quite the same. But Diogiovanni Smith is the point guard who captured a lot of Sixers fans' admiration in the summer league. He's the type of guy who puts up a lot of shots. He can really shoot. He's super aggressive, plays with great intensity. But in comes Jeff, kind of jumping him on the roster, or at least on the depth chart, because of that familiarity with Nurse. Because he's not a super experienced NBA player, but he has been in past 3 seasons, so he is a veteran of sorts. And I think that, like we mentioned, kind of gives him that foundation where Nick can go to him at any time. So far, the health at the guard spot has been looking up. So, like I mentioned, not too certain how much time Jeff will get to play in non-garbage time minutes, but I think the Sixers know that they've got a pretty reliable guy if they do need to go that deep.
So what you're saying, it sounds like it's going to be tough for him to be part of the rotation like he was last year with Toronto.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, what a first game he had. What do you think of that game? I have the splits here, but 10 points, 4 for 7 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3-point. He had a block, 6 assists, 3 steals, tying Buddy Hield, 0 turnovers, 3 rebounds, plus 18. Cameron Payne, who gets more playing time, was a minus 18. I saw him last night playing, and I'm more of a Jeff Dowtin fan. I think he is more in control. And last night was a little disappointing for me. He came in, as you call it, garbage time, but he had the ball, he handled the offense, but he wasn't getting the looks that I'd see a lot of one-on-one in that last 8 minutes. Almost looked like a G-League game where you're trying to debut your skills so you get in the NBA. But he did do what he's supposed to. He managed to get a tough shot off. What I have noticed, it's encouraging to see him 2 for 4 from 3-point land. And that was one of the things that was looked on negatively, if you will, but definitely what he had to improve on was 3-point shooting. And if he can do that consistently, then he could either stick with the Sixers or go on to another NBA team. And that's what I want to lead to is once he's with the Sixers and he finishes the season, do you think he'll be included in the playoff roster? Is that hard to say at this point?
So he is on a 2-way contract. Those contracts are not eligible for the playoffs.
Yes,
the Sixers
right.
are looking for to fill out the rest of their roster. They've got a few roster spots open. They're coming up on a point where they're going to have to make at least a 10-day signing soon. It wouldn't surprise me if they do decide to have Jeff as one of their guys on the 15-man roster. But I would be surprised if he gets legitimate playing time, barring like a bunch of injuries. I forgot to mention campaign earlier in the guard rotation, but he is someone that
Yeah.
Nick will go to as kind of like a starter reserve hybrid, depending on what he feels about the game. So I think there's a chance the Sixers are in a spot where they're trying to avoid the luxury tax or trying to keep it really low, because one of Daryl Morey's big things is looking at the new CBA that's in place and how punitive it can be against teams that spend a lot. And the Sixers are obviously very close to that. So they're really trying to keep it close to the chest. And I think they'll probably finalize their playoff roster like way down the line, like really close to the last date that they can, which is on the final day of the regular season. So I think it's possible Jeff is on the final 15-man roster come playoff time, but I would be surprised if he gets legitimate playoff time.
And you will be surprised if he gets a standard contract, if I'm understanding that.
And then I would say that it's between Jeff and Ricky as guys who could get their contracts converted. Again, that's probably going to come later on down the line because contracts get less expensive the longer the season goes on. I think that for the rest of the season, unless injuries really strike up again, Jeff is probably going to be on the bench. But like you mentioned, in the games that he did play, he played 23 minutes and then 19 minutes in back-to-back games. He was really impressive in those games. I think fans really didn't know much about him, but after that first game against Memphis, they were like, "Oh, this guy can play." Like they latched onto it right away that this is a guy who just knows how to play and can impact the game in various ways.
He has a way of growing on you, and Toronto they have rabid fans. I don't know how you would
Hmm.
compare them to the Sixers, but
Yeah, Sixers fans are
Philadelphia,
intense like that as well.
yeah.
Yes, it's Philly,
But
of course.
I see you have a guy on your
Oh,
team right there.
yeah,
A little
that's my
cat
friend
flying in
Frankie.
there.
Oh yeah, you'll see him in the background getting up to his shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philly is definitely a city where you kind of have to show something to earn their trust, earn their appreciation. But once you get it, once you're a type of guy who will continue to play hard, own up to your mistakes, will just give your all to the team, and understand that it's all about just really giving it your all, playing as hard as you can. I think once you're beloved in Philly, it's kind of hard to shake that. And I think, obviously we'll have to see more out of Jeff, but he got off to as good of a start as anyone could have. You mentioned the stats from his game against Memphis, and he was absolutely one of their best players. I believe he had the highest plus minus on the team
Yes.
at plus 17. And that was a Memphis team that they absolutely should have been able to beat with all the injuries they've been. I mean, they've been really, really bad with injuries, like much worse than the Sixers, who have already had some bad luck. But Jeff came in and he was just able to do so much offensively. He wasn't afraid to shoot. He showed a good understanding of where to be. I think my favorite play from that game was, I believe it was Buddy Hield, where Jeff thought he had a shot, but he quickly swung it to Buddy, and it became a give and go that he took right to the hoop. I think that kind of shows the IQ of players that Nick really likes to have on the court, of guys who know where to be, who can move on and off the ball. And Jeff obviously had those 6 assists, those 3 steals, making plays on offense and defense that I think, again, shows that he's not just, obviously he's a steady hand, but he's also someone who can go out and make those plays that can be a big factor in a close game. That, obviously the Sixers lost, but Nick mentioned after the game he liked what he saw out of Jeff and wished he had played him more in the second half.
And the year before, Nick Nurse, as the coach of the Toronto Raptors, was a big Jeff Dowtin fan. There was a little bit, in my opinion, I can't prove it, but a power struggle between him and Ujiri, and Nick didn't land on his feet the way he wanted to. Fortunately, he went to the Sixers. But
Mm-hmm.
if he was still with the team and there wasn't that power struggle, I think Jeff would have definitely been given a standard contract. He was so close to getting that. And I just, knowing him and his family, I don't know him personally, but I plan to have him on the show. I talked to his dad quite a bit. Just not only is he highly intelligent, he knows every part of the court. He has a memory. He's just a genius, I would say. But his family is just phenomenal, and the upbringing that he has, he's just such a quality person. It was interesting in the fight the other night. I was watching Jeff. When you're a fan of Jeff Dowtin, you're trying to look for him in every possible way, and you're not watching anything else. I saw him in the bench with the other guys. He was already, he looked like a Sixer, and he was riled up. I thought I saw a little bit of a smirk on there because some people were smiling about it,
Yeah,
including.
you're talking about with Kelly Rand on
Yeah, he was
DiVincenzo,
definitely
right? Yeah,
smiling about that.
Kelly was smiling the flash screen. Kelly's been great to be around, and yeah, that Sixers bench, the young guys there, Jeff, Turquavion, Ricky, like they're obviously trying to prove their worth, but they are always putting the team above themselves. Turk and Ricky talk all the time about how they're trying to hype the team up from the bench, and I'm sure Jeff is fitting right in with that, just trying to be the best teammate he can be while Nick tries to navigate what's going on with the roster right now. No doubt in my mind that he's fitting in right there in a Sixers team that has dealt with a lot of bad luck, but is also a very pretty tight knit unit.
And as far as Jeff's concerned, if you're talking about him and Ricky Council, and are you a betting man? I don't want to get in your
Not
personal life. You're not, but
not not too much now.
if you were, who would you bet on? Jeff Dowden, Double Uno, or Ricky Council?
I think that Nick might lean a little bit more towards Jeff, and I think that's kind of apparent by how,
Yeah.
once he's come along, that the guy you need to throw in to kind of help the team go has been Jeff over Ricky. But I do think it's interesting. Ricky plays on the wing. He's got a pretty mature style of play for someone who is pretty young. He's really good at drawing fouls and getting downhill. Is a little bit bigger than Jeff, so I think that makes his defensive versatility a little bit better. I honestly might lean towards Jeff, and I didn't expect that to. Ricky came along before the All-Star break when they were really battered with injuries, and he came in and had some phenomenal games, including a 19-10 game in a huge
Oh,
win in Washington. But now Jeff is kind of, it feels like, taking over that spot as the young guy who's kind of stepping up into that role. So I would probably lean and guess that it would be Jeff if Daryl Morey does decide to go that way. We'll see what decisions they end up making, but I think it's clear that with the experience they have last year, with how Jeff has been able to come along in Delaware and jump right into helping the Sixers, I would probably guess that the preference, at least for Nick, is more towards Jeff than Ricky. And I guess we'll see how aligned. Obviously, he and Daryl are aligned, but Daryl makes
hmm
the roster decisions and Nick just plays who he brings. So I'm sure there's some level of input there, but I could definitely see it going either way, but I would lean a little towards Jeff.
Well, that's good news for Rhody fans. Now, they have a very unique situation, the Sixers. I think they have 2 contracts guaranteed for next year. I'm wondering, does that favor a guy like Jeff if there's so many open spots, or maybe it's just impossible to say where he'll be next year, especially with the Sixers with so much movement. You don't know what direction they're going. They have to make
Yeah.
major moves, and so do you think it would favor him or not?
I think it's kind of tough to say. I think being a two-way player, Jeff is in that spot where he could, feasibly just bounce to another different team easily. But with what he's been showing, it wouldn't surprise me if if they're looking for guys to round out the roster, they just throw him a minimum contract. We'll see, what the rest of the season holds for him in the offseason. Like, he's probably going to occupy a roster spot that's, not super set in stone, probably down on the depth chart. Again, we'll see if he's able to get more playing time in non-garbage time the rest of the season. I think that the Sixers keeping things open, and they're probably going to want some familiarity, so I can easily see them just keeping Jeff on just for that. Another guy that Nurse knows who played with the team this year. I think it is way too early to say, but for all the reasons we've been mentioning, it wouldn't surprise me if Jeff is back with the Sixers next year.
Given the landscape of the NBA, and if Jeff, because there's so much movement every year, actually during the season now, will there be another team that could use Jeff Dowtin services now that he's had some more experience with the NBA? Do you think he fits in to the whole brotherhood of the NBA, the club that you have?
I think he does. I think one of the things that is valued in the NBA now more than ever is versatility and guys who can fit a lot of different contexts. And you look at some of the role players around the league, it's not just guys who can do just one thing, right? Last decade or so, you've seen guys who are just guys who can defend or guys who can just shoot. They only have one skill, and that kind of is what they're known for to earn some playing time. That doesn't really fly anymore. You got to be able to fit a lot of different. The game is just too complex. It's too fast paced. It's too analytically minded and talented to be a guy that can only do one type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are obviously a good amount of guys out there, and that kind of influences the way the players are developing. But I think Jeff has already shown, and again, he's, we talked about how he's old for a two-way, but he's still only 26. So
Yeah.
he's not going to slow down athletically anytime soon. And I think he strikes me as a guy who can play with a lot of different types of players because he can handle the ball, he can shoot it, he can move smartly off the ball, he can defend at least multiple positions in the backcourt. So he does strike me as having that type of game style that any team would pick up on as like, hey, let's give this guy a go, see what he can bring off our bench. And I think it would be, kind of bold to assume that he'll be a starter at some point in the future. But I can absolutely see, a team out there that has stars structured and they're looking for guys that can fit them. And they're probably looking for somebody like Jeff who can do a lot of different things, who can take some type of command when he needs to, but can also step back and serve as a complementary role. A lot of what Jeff can do, like I said, it just fits a lot of different contexts. And, obviously he only made it to the NBA this season pretty late on and as a result of injuries, but he does strike me as that type of guy who seems like just like a coach's player, just like the perfect guy to go to when you don't know what you need, but you just need someone who can help your team move forward, try to impact the game in a bunch of different ways. So I'm very interested to see what the future holds for Jeff. I can't say for certain whether it's with the Sixers or not, but I will for sure be, keeping an eye on him if it's not with the Sixers, just seeing where he ends up and if he gets a chance to stick around and be a part of a team's rotation.
Thanks so much, Sam, for coming in, and let's stay in touch when more transpires with Jeff Dowtin.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.